Hi, Family Foundation Action. This is Bruce Schlesman, the Executive Director. Thank you so much for the generous support you've been providing this organization and our fight and what we do every day. So I just wanted to provide this exclusive update to you, our most generous supporters, about what we're doing here every day and talk to a few of our interns about what they're seeing at the door so you can kind of get an inside take on what's going on each and every day here at Family Foundation Action. Let's talk to some of the interns. Welcome. I'm here with Angolo Soto, one of our great summer interns here with Family Foundation Action, who's been in the field, canvassing, meeting with voters, winning votes every day. We're just here to talk about a little bit about your experience in the field. So thanks so much, Angelo, for sitting down with us and talking a little bit and sharing your story.
Thank you so much for having me on, Bruce.
Well, I just wanted to start first by talking about some of your experiences. And when you're out in the field, it seems like, at least in polling, a lot of people don't know that an election is around the corner.
Mm-hmm.
So what's kind of the interest there? What's it like getting to a door where someone doesn't know that the election is happening?
So there's been a lot of people who have been undecided, especially since it's primary season right now, and a lot of folks don't really vote during the primary election versus a general, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've been hearing a lot of people who are unaware of that on the ground and whatnot. So
What's kind of been your experience when you're talking to those people? Like, do they seem to get engaged when you're knocking on their door? Or?
Yes, yeah. So they're fairly engaged within the conversation that I'm having with them.
Great.
So yeah.
So I wanted you to share a story or two about when you got to a voter's door, flipping voters. So a lot of you guys have come in from the field with some great stories about winning over voters. So just share one of those stories with us today.
So one of them was a young lady who has two kids, who was really concerned about education within the school systems and the abrasive indoctrination of that. And she's worried for her two kids because the school system, from her perspective, isn't the sole caretaker of those children. She is.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
So on that note, what are some of the big issues that you're seeing the majority of people talk about that they're concerned about for this election season?
Education seems at a high for them, and as well as the economy, but more so education and parental rights as well.
Oh, well, great. Well, thanks, Angelo, for sitting down with us and talking a little bit about your experience on the doors.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I wanted to introduce another one of our interns to talk about his experience on the doors and what's been happening in the field, Tyler. Tyler, thanks for coming on and talking about your story a little bit.
Of course. I've had a great time this summer.
Well, that's great to hear. So I wanted to start a little bit where we started with Angelo about, there's been a lack of interest in some regard in the election because it's kind of early right now. I wanted to talk a little bit about your experience kind of coming across a voter who doesn't know there's an election happening.
Right. So you come across voters often who either are not aware of the election that's coming up or don't know who's on the ballot, don't know what races to get engaged with. A lot of them expect there to be an election, just not knowing, what is going to be showing up on their ballot. So a lot of what I ran into when I'm just talking to voters, they'll ask when's the election in November, but early voting starts in September because that's something that I've been working a lot on, is trying to get people to sign up for early voting, mail-in ballots through the Governor Youngkin's program, or going in person early. You never know what's going to happen on election day, so that's something that I've been really pushing on them. But they're not aware of when they're not aware of the election. Just highlighting what's at stake. You have an exceptionally competitive races all across the state in both the House of Delegates and State Senate. And a lot of them who, staunch supporters of Governor Youngkin voted for him 2 years ago don't know that a lot of his legislation has been held up when it comes to the Senate, and not being able to get what the House has been able to pass is getting held up in the Senate. And so Youngkin's agenda has kind of been stalled. So, and therefore maintaining the House and flipping the Senate is incredibly vital to the rest of
we're going to need all of those Youngkin supporters out there, and that's a big reason why we're doing this, is turning out these low information, lower propensity voters who don't vote every year out this year.
Absolutely.
So I also want you to talk a little bit about sharing a story about you've come in with a few great stories about flipping individual voters. Just wanted to talk a little bit about that. What's one of those great stories that you've gotten at the doors?
Yeah, so just like Angelo said, parental rights seems to be the top of the list for a lot of voters. You also have pro-life issues being at the top of the list for some other people who are extremely passionate about that, especially after the Dobbs decision. And so one example of a voter I ran into was when I was knocking doors for Danny Diggs, who's running for state senate in the Hampton Roads, Yorktown area. And I was talking to a voter who was at the door, had 2 kids there that kind of came up to the door first. And then when they noticed it wasn't someone they knew, they went back, and then their parent comes and gets the door. But the person, she was undecided. She didn't know, who she was going to vote for in the race. She didn't know, what the electorate looked like, or what either candidate stood for. But the Democratic opponent in that race was the incumbent, Monty Mason. She said that education was her number one issue. She was really concerned about education, but she knew Monty Mason personally, and also that, she hadn't really heard. She knew that Danny Diggs was sheriff, but she hadn't heard what his policy ideas were. And so when I was talking to her about parental rights, I brought up that, there was a scandal with Monty Mason where he had actually called the parental rights issue parental crap. He said this in a discussion with, I think, a delegate.
Yeah, a Democrat delegate.
Right. And so she didn't believe me at first. She was like, there's no way he actually said that. And if he did say that, you're taking it out of context. So I pulled my phone out, played the clip where he says that, all this parental crap, and she heard that, and she said, well, then I can't support him. And she'll be voting for Danny Diggs. So I think it just shows how important, getting this information out there, that there are conservatives in the field who are running on the issue of trying to reform education in a way that puts parents first. Just as Governor Youngkin did 2 years ago, same agenda still applies.
Absolutely, and that's why you guys are doing this, and so many other door knockers in the field, precisely for this purpose. On that note, big issues that you're seeing at the doors. What are some of the big issues that you've come across that voters care about, that they're going to be voting on in November?
So increasing parental rights in education, like I said, is really big. Trying to move to a school choice environment in Virginia. A lot of parents are really passionate about that. Protecting the lives of the unborn, I think, is also, at the top of a lot of voters' minds. You talk to some voters who have daughters who are playing in high school sports, and they don't want their daughters competing against biological men.
It's just common sense.
Exactly. And so the same thing when you have voters who are raising children or expectant mothers, and the idea of that is just so important to them. They hold these values close to their heart. And I think when you talk to voters, you'll find across those issues that, when it comes to family, that's what's first. And so that's, I think, been the main focus and the main idea that I've gotten from voters this year.
Well, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your story a little bit with us here. Thanks, Tyler.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work.